Hello, friends. Welcome to yet another session on international finance. In this video, we are going to explore the international monetary system in an historical sequence. International monetary system refers to the rules, instrument, facilities, and organization that affects international payments. We will explore the gold standard, the Brettonwoods System, the Smithsonian Conference, as well as the Jamaica Accords. Welcome to the video. As I said, International Monetary System refers to the custom, instrument, facilities, and organization that affects international payments. We can classify international monetary system either on the basis of how the exchange rates are determined or what are the forms of the foreign reserve asset or international reserve asset. So you can have an exchange rate classification or you can have a reserve asset classification. On the basis of exchange rate classification, the international monetary system can be classified as those following a fixed exchange rate system, an adjustable peg system, a crawling peg system, the managed floating, or the freely float or clean float exchange rate system. These topics were already being the topic of one of our earlier presentation. Sticking towards the second classification, which is international reserve classification, it can be called the gold standard, in which your reserve asset consists only of gold. A pure fiduciary standard, in which the reserve asset consists only one particular currency. For example, if your international reserve consists only the pound sterling, it is known as a pure sterling standard. If it is only dollar, it's known as a pure dollar standard. If your foreign reserve or international reserve consists both currency as well as gold, it is known as gold exchange standard. We will start from the gold standard. The oldest system of an organized international monetary system is known as the gold standard during the period 1880 to 1940. The exchange rate system was that of a fixed exchange rate system, in which each country defines the gold content of its currency and must be ready to buy or sell any amount of gold at that price. The exchange rate was determined on the basis of the gold content of the currency, also we call the mint parity. That is, the currencies were supported with gold or currencies were backed with the gold, and every currency is freely convertible to gold. There was no restriction on the shipment of the gold, or gold can be bought or sold at will. During the gold standard, London was the center of international trade and finance. Those periods marked relatively free international trade, but gold standard was collapsed with the outbreak of the First World War in the year 1940. Even though attempts have been made to restore the gold standard, it again failed with the outbreak of the Great Depression of 1930s in the year 1929. The adjustment mechanism in gold standard is known as the price specie flow mechanism. It's an automatic adjustment mechanism that is used to correct any kind of balance of payment disequilibrium. It's based on quantity theory of money and believe that the economy has always a tendency to move towards the equilibrium. We know that the quantity theory of money states that MV is equal to PQ, in which it is assumed that the price level varies directly with the money supply. V as well as Q is assumed to be constant. The mechanism basically takes place through the inflow or outflow of gold as well as its influence on the domestic price level. For example, a deficit nation would experience a gold loss or an outflow of gold. As a result, there will be a decline in the money supply because money supply is directly proportional to the availability of gold in the country. When there is a fall in money supply, prices will fall and obviously export will be encouraged to correct the deficit in the balance of payment or deficit in the current account. Exact opposite will take place in the surplus nation, which would experience a gold gain, an increase in price and a correction of balance of payment disequilibrium. This process will continue until the deficit as well as surplus are completely eliminated. Moving towards the second mechanism or second type, we call it as the Brettonwoods Conference of 1944. 42 countries of United Nations met at Brettonwoods, New Hampshire province of United States. The aim was to create a new international monetary system because gold standard was by then already collapsed. The Bretton Woods Conference called for the establishment of, in fact, 3 institutions, but only 2 actually came up. One, the International Monetary Fund, with an objective of achieving an exchange rate stability and help those countries who are facing balance of payment crisis. International Bank for Reconstruction and Development to assist post-war reconstruction and development of member countries and to provide long-term development assistance. The Bretton Woods Conference also called for an establishment of International Trade Organization ITO, but it never materialized. We will have another video on the Bretton Woods institutions like IMF, IBRD. The Bretton Woods system was essentially a gold exchange standard in which US was ready to maintain the price of gold at $35 per ounce and ready to exchange dollar for gold without any restriction at that price. That is, only dollar was convertible to gold. Other countries were directed or requested to fix their exchange rate with respect to dollar and obviously indirectly with the gold. It's an adjustable peg exchange rate system in the sense that plus or minus 1% in this par value were allowed. Practically a gold dollar standard because countries were keeping their forex reserve in the form of either gold or dollar because dollar was obviously convertible to gold. The higher changes in the exchange rate will be allowed only when the countries were facing the fundamental disequilibrium with the approval of the IMF, even though exchange rate changes of less than 10% can be done even without the approval of the International Monetary Fund. These were the problems faced by the Bretton Woods system. One was liquidity or adequacy of reserve problem. During the Bretton Woods era, the only reserve asset was gold as well as dollar. As we know, the availability of gold is limited and US were unwilling to print more and more dollars because every dollar involves a gold convertibility of dollar. So US were reluctant to print more of dollars. So the world faced one liquidity issue. The second one was the confidence problem because the US, which was initially facing a surplus in the current account, began to face a deficit as well as crisis in their balance of payment. So there was an issue of confidence among those countries that US might devalue its currency. The third issue was that of adjustment problem, in which some of the countries of the world, most notably Germany as well as Japan, were facing huge balance of payment surplus. On the other hand, countries like US were facing balance of payment deficit. So how an adjustment can take place in the Bretton Woods system? That was the third issue with respect to the problems of the Bretton Woods. The most important reason for the collapse of the Bretton Woods system was that took place as a result of balance of payment crisis in the United States. Initially, they faced a dollar shortage, then led to dollar glut, and there was a gold depletion of dollar. In fact, the Central Bank of Germany had enough dollar asset to take away every gold in the banks of United States. And increasing apprehensions were made that US may not be able to satisfy their commitment of convertibility of dollar into gold. In fact, that apprehension came to as reality in August 15, 1971, when then President Richard Nixon withdrew the commitment of gold convertibility of dollar and in fact imposed 10% import surcharge in United States. After the collapse of Brettonwoods System in the year 1971, the leading industrial nation of G10 or Group of 10 countries met at Smithsonian Institute in Washington DC, United States. They were agreed to increase the price of dollar from $35 per ounce to $38 per ounce. That is, there's a devaluation of dollar of about 9%. The two countries who were experiencing surplus in their balance of payment, namely Germany as well as Japan, their currencies were revalued at 13 and 17% respectively. And a new set of par values known as central values or central rates were established in the agreement. And countries were agreed a greater kind of a flexibility plus or minus 2.25% in either side of the central rates. It can be remembered that dollar was still inconvertible to gold after the Nixon shock. So essentially it's a dollar standard. It provided more of a flexibility because Brettonwood System was allowed only 1% change in their exchange rate or par value, and it created an optimism for future. Richard Nixon has said that it's the most significant monetary agreement in the history of the world. But it failed due to a continuous speculation of dollar as well as steps taken by a number of currencies when they began to follow a freely floating exchange rate system. After the Smithsonian Agreement, we have a Jamaica Accords of 1976, in which IMF made a series of changes that were incorporated into the IMF's Articles of Agreement. In Jamaica Accord, each member country was free to adopt its own exchange rate arrangement. The role of gold to be downgraded and the importance of SDR, special drawing right of IMF, is to be enhanced, and IMF is to maintain surveillance of exchange rate behavior to avoid any manipulation with respect to the member countries. In fact, this Jamaica Accords paved way to the present era monetary system. In this video, we have examined the gold standard, the Brettonwoods System, the Smithsonian Conference, as well as Jamaica Accords. Hope that the session is useful to you. You can always visit our blog www.skpeco.blogspot.in. Until next time, stay safe, happy learning. Thank you.